so it cannot detect anything. And the wonderful thing about this is that you can read any textbook you want, and they will say dead sounds are dangerous in first order modulators, less of a problem in second order modulators, and unheard of in third order or higher modulators. And now we have on the table a third order modulator with a dead sound. Hallelujah, I would say. And the reason there is that these systems, these mixed analog digital, very nonlinear systems that we can only understand if we analyze them in the linear domain, they are so difficult that really anything can happen, which means if you want to go analog or analog digital, it's a very, very good thing to do for you, because here still experience and what you do with the things, the human being that does the thinking, this is still very important, because simply you cannot simulate everything, you cannot calculate everything. It's down to experience and gut instinct and everything with these sigma delta modulators. So here, although these structures look very simple, still a lot of progress is made every year. A lot of very interesting systems are created every year in academia, in research, and also in the industry. Yeah. But the point is to simulate. So I would like to conclude this lecture by showing you some simulations. I will also show the idle tones, which are not very interesting on paper here, but much more interesting if I show them to you in a MATLAB simulation. So this one I have not yet transported to where is my MATLAB? Brilliant. Just give me a second. Yeah, okay. So here we are. So this I have not yet transported to Python, so it is still a MATLAB MLX file that I will, of course, give you. And here you see how you can use the toolbox of Schreier and Temesh for doing simulations in MATLAB. So I first run this section here, and this section now gives me an oversampling rate of 128 divided by 4. I do such things sometimes such that I can switch the oversampling rate in steps of 2, so don't worry at the moment. And now I have prepared a sigma delta modulator here. I will explain some of the code later. Right now I just run it. Yeah. And what it does now is it calculates the noise transfer function, the signal transfer function, and then also plots the spectrum. Now here you see the spectrum of this sigma delta modulator. Let me see whether I can increase that a little bit. Yeah, that should do. Here you see the spectrum of the sigma delta modulator. I have added white noise also, and the signal. Here you see a very large signal peak, and then here you see the floor here of the white noise that the sensor is doing, and then here you see the red curve, which is the theoretical shape of the quantization noise. This is the quarter wave of the sinus function I described to you before, and the blue one is the actual simulated spectrum, and you already see that it looks similar, but there are fundamental differences, because, for example, up here it doesn't really look like what it should. So there seems to be more stuff happening at the very high frequencies than it should be happening. At the very bottom, I always make a second plot, and that is the time behavior of the quantizer input. So here in this nice field of dots, you just see 10,000 samples of the quantizer input, how they are distributed. So they jump between -1 and +1, look very chaotic. That's the point of the sigma delta modulator, that it tries to get as much variation at the quantizer input as possible. But still, you can see from these ripples here, you can see that the sinus somehow is represented there, so the input signal does get to the output of the quantizer. And I can make this unstable, So the maximum input this one can stand would be 1. So if I go down here at the test input and I say the test amplitude is instead of half of the full scale, it is 1.2 of the full scale, then it cannot follow anymore. And what you get is a totally different spectrum. Oh, that's interesting. Why can it still follow? Let me think. Is something wrong in the configuration? Funny. Let's go higher. Yeah, at least it gives a lot of distortion. Ah, yes, of course, this is a first order modulator, so it still can do something, but what it does is really not nice. So you see, you get a lot of distortion. I can also increase if I want the order of the modulator. So let's take a higher order sigma delta modulator, which we will describe next time, for example, a third order modulator. And then what should happen in the transfer function here is that the slope now gets much steeper. You see, this now should be essentially a rise of, instead of 20 dB per decade, we now have 60 dB per decade. It flattens off at the top. Here again you have the noise floor, you have the signal here in it, and here you also have these artifacts at the higher frequencies. But this here already looks much better, because now in the signal range we don't have a lot of noise left, so the noise goes down a lot. The input of the quantizer looks a little bit different, almost more tidy. But now if I take this here and make the input signal too high, then I think we should see the very bad behavior. So now the whole sigma delta modulator collapses, and the output spectrum has got nothing to do anymore with what it should have. So a totally incorrect behavior, and you don't see the signal anymore. So this is not very graceful, what the sigma delta modulator is doing. Okay, let's go back to the first order sigma delta modulator to show you something else. Yeah? So now what I do in the first order sigma delta modulator, run again, and then I remove the noise a little bit more. You should never simulate this without any noise, because you will not get something realistic. So here you see the noise floor at the bottom. I simulated that by actually calculating KT over C noise of a sensor element presently. That sensor element here has a capacitance of 25 femtofarad. So let's get to 25 picofarad, which is more realistic. So lower noise, and run again. And then we would see from this sensor capacitance that the noise here should have gone down, but now the noise that we should see is actually outside the range. So everything is now dominated by quantization noise in this first order modulator. So we don't see the noise of the sensor element anymore. And now I remove the signal. I don't remove it completely. But what I do is I make it very, 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 very small. As you see in these simulations, I'm always reluctant to give it any completely ideal input, like no signal whatsoever. And now there is something interesting that I did here. These are these lines here. Now I can do something to my sigma delta modulator. I can calculate what the bin frequency is of my Fourier transform. So this would be 0.9766 Hertz now. I have calculated that from the length of the simulation, from the average number and anything. So now I know how far the steps of the frequency bins are in this discrete Fourier transform I have here. And now I choose a bin number 300, and I want to generate the tone there. And I generate this tone by just choosing the frequency. So the idle frequency I want to see is the bin width times 300. So that would be 292.96 Hertz or so. And now I choose a DC offset at the input. And this DC offset at the input is simply the idle frequency I want to see, which is 290 Hertz, divided by the sampling frequency. That would be an input offset voltage here, you see it on the right, of 2.3 millivolts. So instead of having 0 at the input, I have a 2.3 millivolt offset at the input. And I run. And now you see, in fact, that what I get here looks different from what it should look. So this is not okay, is it? So you still have kind of a rising quantization noise shape, but I have now generated a signal here at this exact frequency. I chose 292 Hertz. So here I have a signal, and I also have all higher harmonics of that signal here. And the reason for that lies in the fact that our assumptions about the independence of the quantization noise was incorrect. In fact, if you look at the input of the quantizer now, it doesn't look random in any way anymore. So the input of the quantizer just slopes up until it reaches the tipping point, and then down again. So you get some slicing. And this sound looks a little bit funny because it does, of course, not just go up, and then jump down. You see that kind of these lines overlap. So what happens is you have a point in the top one, bottom top, so it jumps up and down very hectically. So every second point is in the upper line, every second point is in the lower line, and then the 2 points oscillating move up until the upper one goes down, and then they do like this through the time. So you get a very, very deterministic behavior because of this wrong assumption that the quantization noise is independent of what we had. And in fact, it's as simple as that. If I choose to have my frequency in bin number 150, I just change it and then restart. Then I get the lower offset voltage, which is 1.1 millivolt. You get the spectrum that looks as before, and then the only thing that happens is that this stripy behavior here gets a little bit flatter. So this is bad news. So what I'm telling you is essentially that this first order sigma delta modulator I just explained should probably not be used in practice, because everything you do here will just give you a tone, and it's not a nice tone. I have actually prepared it for you that I can show it if you want. So let me activate these two things here. So I generate an audio player element here, and then I play it for you. So that's not what you would an audio AD converter sound. So that you don't want that, do you? So that was just the output a sigma delta modulator would give you if you have an offset at the input. Totally unacceptable, isn't it? It is of course better if you go to a higher order sigma delta modulator. So let's look at the second order sigma delta modulator. And run that through. No worries, the sound will not come again. So in the second order modulator with exactly the same settings, you still see that you have this idle tone here, but it is much lower, isn't it? Before we had minus 50 dB, now we have minus 90 dB. And the reason is that the second order modulator does a double integration, so therefore the input of the quantizer here looks now different. You don't have the stripes anymore, you have something more chaotic. And I tell you, the patterns you can get if you play with that script, have you seen all those nice fractal images? Doesn't it look just like a fractal? Yeah? It actually is one. So much of the theory that you have with the stability and limit cycles and so on of delta sigma modulators actually deals with fractal attractors. So Gerald Deutschland, in the figure it looks like that the amplitude of the idle tone does not change with its fundamental frequency. Is that true? Ha! In the first order modulator it was true. Is it true? But in the second order it is not. So in the second order modulator it will change